Hey guys, thank you for joining me once again. Today I will be talking about the subject of pride and relying on resources instead of relying on God. I will be reading out of Chronicles chapter 20. Chronicles chapter 20. In a very just a small but interesting passage where we see David, a man after God's own heart, a man who defeated Goliath, the giant, a man who became king, whom the Lord anointed, whom the Lord called to be Israel's king for a time, a man who wrote most of the Psalms. Was also susceptible to sin. He was also vulnerable to the attacks of the enemy. And here we are going to see that the enemy is going to take advantage of David's pride. He was going to expose David's pride, and often that's what happens when the enemy tends to attack us. He's not going to attack our strong fortified areas. He's going to go to the weak areas in our life. He is going to affect what we neglect. He is going to capitalize on the things that we trivialize, on the things that we just don't address in our lives. And in one sense, that shows us what we need to address, right? That shows us when we give in to pride, to sexual sin, to the lust of the flesh, and all these things, and we find ourselves in sin and broken and asking God to forgive us. That shows us the areas that we need to reinforce in our lives, that we need to gird and armor up and strength and all that stuff. So let me go ahead and start reading here so you can get the specifics of the type of sin that happened here. It says here in 1 Chronicles 20 verse 1, "Now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. So David said to Joab and to the leaders of the people, 'Go number Israel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring the number of them to me, that I may know it.' And Joab answered, 'May the Lord make his people 100 times more than they are. But my lord, the king, are they not all my lord's servants? Why then does my lord require this thing? Why should he be a cause of guilt in Israel?'" So let's stop there. Counting the people, taking this type of census from the army was not a good thing. The motive behind this was a reliance on men and numbers instead of God. And that's why we see here in verse 7 that God is displeased and God strikes David. Look at verse 7. "And God was displeased with this thing, therefore he struck Israel. So David said to God, 'I have sinned greatly because I have done this thing. But now I pray, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly.'" So he struck Israel, not David specifically. But the point is still made here. When we trust in things, we are showing our cards. We are showing that hey, I have a pride issue. I am trusting in the number of people that I oversee, that I lead, or the number of digits on my check, my paycheck, right? Or the number of degrees that I have, or even the number of years that have been added to my life, anything can constitute as something that can get in the way of us, of God working His grace through us. And that's what we need to remember. It's about God's grace, and grace is unmerited favor. So I pray that you and myself as well would not trust in how many followers we have, but in who we follow, right? That we may not trust in numbers, but in God, who is the one who gives and the one who takes away. That is why God was displeased, because He counted people to trust in His army, to trust in His own self, in His own strength, instead of the Lord. So that is a lesson behind the passage. Don't trust in numbers. Don't count people. Count on people. Does that make sense? Don't count people. Count on people. That's what it's about, and that's what David's servant meant by what he said here. He says in verse 3, "Are they not all my Lord's servants? Why then does my Lord require this thing?" Right? You've got people you can count on. You don't need to focus on the number, but focus on the people.